everyone. Welcome to our second lecture on public administration. Today, we will explore the concept of accountability, which is one of the most important and challenging aspects of public administration. By the end of this lecture, you will be able to understand the meaning of accountability and the various approaches for defining it, explore the historical development of accountability, define the elements of accountability, and connect the approaches to accountability to administrative ethics and the public service. Let's begin with the origins and importance of accountability. So the word accountability comes from the Latin word accomptare, which means to account. It originated in the 1200s in the notion that something ought to be capable of being counted. This was especially relevant in the medieval period when kings and nobles claimed accountability for their money and resources. They used accounting methods to keep track of their income and expenditure and to ensure that their subordinates were loyal and honest. Accountability is even more important in a modern democracy where the government is supposed to serve the public interest and respect the rule of law. The public has the right to know how the government spends its money, how it makes decisions, and how it performs its functions. The government, in turn, has the duty to explain and justify its actions, and to correct any mistakes or misconduct. This is the essence of accountability, a relationship between people about actions and decisions. So, what is accountability? Accountability is not a simple or straightforward concept. It has different meanings and dimensions depending on the context and perspective. However, we can identify some common elements and approaches to accountability in public administration. One way to understand accountability is to think of it as the form of control. Control refers to the ability or authority to influence or direct the behavior of others. In public administration, control is exercised by policymakers, such as elected officials, judges, or the public, over administrators, such as civil servants, managers, or professionals. The purpose of control is to ensure that administrators act in accordance with the policies and values of policymakers, and that they do not abuse their power or discretion. Control can be positive or negative. Positive control means obligating individuals to do something they ought to do, such as following the law, achieving the goals, or reporting the results. Negative control means preventing individuals from doing something they should not do, such as breaking the rules, wasting the resources, or harming the public. However, control is not always balanced or effective. Sometimes control focuses too much on finding and correcting bureaucratic errors rather than on encouraging and rewarding good performance. This is a negative approach because it creates a culture of blame and fear where administrators are constantly under scrutiny and criticism. It also makes it easier for the media and the public to highlight the failures and scandals of the bureaucracy rather than the successes and achievements. Another problem with control is that it can be used to escape or shift the blame, rather than to accept or share the responsibility. Policymakers often like to maintain some distance between their decisions and their consequences, especially when things go wrong. They may blame the administrators for not implementing their policies properly or for causing problems that they could not foresee or prevent. They may also avoid making clear or consistent policies or delegate the decision-making power to the administrators so that they can avoid being held accountable for the outcomes. These problems show that control is not enough to ensure accountability. Accountability also requires trust and cooperation between the policymakers and the administrators, and between government and the public. Accountability also requires transparency and participation, so that the actions and decisions of the government are visible and accessible to the public, and that the public can have a voice and a role in the governance process. The gotcha effect is the result of a culture of blame and fear, where administrators are constantly under scrutiny and criticism for every problem or mistake they make. This creates a situation where administrators try to hide or avoid any problems they are accountable for, rather than solving them or learning from them. The gotcha effect can have several negative impacts on public administration, such as punishing risk-taking. Administrators may be reluctant to try new or innovative solutions because they fear the consequences of failure or error. This can lead to too safe decisions that prevent government from doing its job effectively or creatively. Increasing red tape. Administrators may have to follow more rules and procedures or produce more reports and documents to prove their compliance or justify their actions. This can increase the administrative costs and burdens and reduce the responsiveness and flexibility of public administration. Reducing trust and cooperation. Administrators may become defensive or secretive and avoid sharing information or collaborating with others. This can reduce the trust and cooperation between administrators, policymakers, and the public, and undermine the quality and legitimacy of public administration. The gotcha effect reflects the classic dilemma of public administration, as put forth by British scholar Peter Self. This dilemma refers to the tensions between the requirements of accountability and those of effective executive action. On the one hand, accountability is necessary to ensure that administrators act in accordance with the policies and values of the policymakers, and that they do not abuse their power or discretion. Accountability also serves as a mechanism for the public to monitor and influence the actions and decisions of the government and to hold it responsible for the outcomes. On the other hand, effective executive action requires that administrators have some degree of discretion and autonomy to adapt the policies to the special circumstances and local conditions, and to find the best way to achieve the government's goals. Discretion also allows administrators to use their skills and knowledge and to exercise their professional judgment and responsibility. While administrators must be given leverage to make the right decisions, they must be held accountable for their decisions. Hence, administrators must always follow the law and meet the goals of public policy. In the United States, the bureaucracy and the programs it administers are the product of actions in the legislature. The legislature, in turn, delegates the responsibility for implementing the law to the executive branch. The executive then delegates responsibility for carrying out the law to those in the bureaucracy. This basic principle structures the way we think about how accountability ought to work. Chief executives often bristle under these constraints and seek to expand their power in implementing the law. These tensions frame the politics of the administrative process. One of the main questions that public administrators face is whether they should follow the orders of their superiors or whether they should expose the wrongdoings of their organizations to the public. This is the dilemma of following orders versus whistleblowing. On the one hand, following orders is important to maintain the hierarchy and the coordination of public administration. It also shows respect and loyalty to the authority and the law. On the other hand, whistleblowing is important to protect the public interest and the values of public service. It also shows courage and responsibility to the society and the conscience. The answer to this question is not easy or simple. It depends on the situation and the context. However, one thing is clear. Public administrators cannot use the excuse of following order to justify their actions or decisions that are illegal, immoral, or harmful. This was established by the post-World War II war crimes trials, which held accountable the administrators who committed heinous acts under the orders of their leaders. Therefore, public administrators must exercise their own judgment and weigh the pros and cons of following order or whistleblowing. They must also be prepared to face the consequences of their choice, whether it is praise or blame, reward or punishment, acceptance or rejection. One way to ensure accountability is to set legal boundaries for the government and its workers. This means that there are laws and rules that limit and guide what government can and cannot do and how it should do it. These laws and rules protect the rights and freedoms of the citizens and make the government follow the same standards and procedures as everyone else. The idea of legal boundaries comes from a long history of people fighting for their rights and liberties against powerful rulers. For example, in 1215, the nobles of England forced King John to agree to a document called the Magna Carta, which limited his power and gave some rights to the people. This document is considered one of the first examples of the rule of law, which is the principle that everyone, including the government, is subject to the law. The rule of law is the basis for administrative accountability because it provides a way to check and control how the government workers do their job. For example, the rule of law allows the citizens to sue the government if it violates their rights, or to vote out the politicians if they disagree with their policies. The rule of law also allows the courts or the auditors to review and enforce the legality of the government actions or decisions. One of the thinkers who supported the rule of law was Thomas Paine, who was a leader of the American Revolution. He argued that the people have a natural right to form their own government and that the government should protect that right by following the law. He also argued that the people should have a say in making the law and that the law should reflect the common good. The U.S. Constitution is the supreme law of the land and the foundation of the American political system. The Constitution is also a web of cross-cutting restraints on government and the basic strategy for administrative accountability in the U.S. government. The Constitution creates a system of checks and balances where the power of the government is divided and shared among three branches: the executive, the legislative, and the judicial. Each branch has some authority and responsibility over the other branches and can limit or challenge their actions or decisions. The Constitution also creates a system of federalism where the power of the government is divided and shared among two levels, the national and the state. Each level has some authority and responsibility over the other level and can limit or challenge their actions or decisions. The Constitution also creates a system of democracy where the power of the government is derived and shared by the people. The people have some authority and responsibility over the government and can limit or challenge their actions or decisions through elections, petitions, or protests. The Constitution provides multiple backstops or safeguards to ensure that the government does not abuse or misuse its power and that it respects and protects the rights and liberties of the people. The Constitution also provides multiple opportunities or avenues for the people to participate and influence the governance process and to hold the government accountable for its actions and decisions. However, the balance of power that the Constitution creates is not always stable or clear. The government and its workers may face conflicts or tensions among the different branches, levels, or actors of the government, or between the government and the people. The government and its workers may also face changes or challenges in the policies or the issues that they have to deal with, or in the preferences or the interests of the people. The basic strategy of accountability that the Constitution creates is to give the government power, but to set legal bounds to limit the dangers of its use. This means that the government and its workers have the authority and the responsibility to act and decide on behalf of the public and to achieve the public interest and the public good. However, this also means that the government and its workers have to follow the law and the rules that limit and guide their actions and decisions, and to respect the rights and the values of the public. The basic strategy of accountability that the Constitution creates is important and necessary because it balances and integrates the two requirements of public administration: accountability and effectiveness. Accountability means that the government and its workers should explain and justify their actions and decisions and be held responsible for them. Effectiveness means that the government and its workers should do their job well and efficiently and achieve their goals and results. The basic strategy of accountability that the Constitution creates is also important and necessary because it balances and integrates two aspects of public administration: politics and administration. Politics means the process and the activity of making decisions and policies for the society. Administration means the implementation and the management of the government policies and functions. The Progressive Era was a period of social and political reform in the United States from the late 19th century to the early 20th century. The Progressive Era was marked by the rise of new problems and challenges such as the industrialization, the urbanization, the immigration, the corruption, the inequality that the government and its workers had to deal with. The Progressive Era was a period of adaptation and improvement in public administration where the government and its workers used the rule of law as well as other strategies and tools to make the government work better. The rule of law was the principle that the government and its workers should follow the law and the rules, and that the law and the rules should protect the rights and the liberties of the people. The rule of law was the basis and the standards for administrative accountability that the government and its workers had to follow and meet. However, the rule of law was not enough or effective to deal with the new and complex problems and issues that the government and its workers faced in the Progressive Era. The rule of law was also not enough or effective to reflect or respond to the new and diverse preferences and interests of the people, the parties, and the groups in the Progressive Era. Therefore, the government and its workers had to use other strategies and tools, such as the professionalization, the scientific management, the public relations, or the public participation to improve the accountability and the effectiveness of public administration. One of the thinkers who influenced and shaped the public administration in the progressive era was Woodrow Wilson, who was President of the United States and a scholar of public administration. He argued that public administrators could be empowered to do the government's work without threatening the individual rights, because the rule of law would hold them accountable. He also argued that public administrators should be separated from politics so that they could focus on doing their job well and efficiently without being influenced by the political pressures or interests. The politics-administration dichotomy was the idea and the strategy that the government and its workers should separate the politics from the administration in public administration. The politics-administration dichotomy was the idea and the strategy that the politicians should determine the policy and the administrators should carry out the policy within the bounds set by the elected officials. The politics-administration dichotomy was the idea and the strategy that the progressives proposed and promoted in the progressive era to create an effective administrative state in a modern democracy. The politics-administration dichotomy was the idea and the strategy that the progressives believed and hoped would solve the problems and the challenges that the government and its workers faced in the progressive era. The politics-administration dichotomy had some advantages, such as it clarified and simplified the roles and expectations of the government and its workers and avoided the confusion or the conflict between them. It enhanced and improved the performance and the quality of the government and its workers and increased the efficiency and the effectiveness of public administration. It protected and respected the rights and the liberties of the people and ensured the accountability and the legitimacy of public administration. The politics-administration dichotomy also has some disadvantages, such as it ignored and denied the reality and the complexity of the government and its workers and oversimplified the nature and the dynamics of public administration. It limited and constrained the influence and the participation of the government and its workers and reduced the responsiveness and the flexibility of public administration. It also created and reinforced the gap and the tension between the government and its workers, and it undermined the trust and the cooperation of public administration. The rule of law is the idea that everyone, including the government and its workers, should obey the same laws and be treated equally by the law. This sounds fair and reasonable, but it also has some problems. One problem is that the rule of law often clashes with politics. Politics is the process of making decisions and influencing people in the government. Politics can affect how the laws are made, interpreted, and enforced. Sometimes politics can interfere with the rule of law and create conflicts or contradictions. Another problem is that the rule of law does not fit well with the balance between government power and individual freedom. The rule of law gives the government the authority to make and enforce laws, but it also limits the government's power to protect the rights and liberties of the people. However, finding the right balance is not easy. Sometimes the government needs more power to deal with certain situations, such as emergency or crisis. Other times, the government needs less power to respect the people's choices and preferences. The rule of law cannot always accommodate these changes and variations. A third problem is that the rule of law cannot fully control the actions of public administrators. Public administrators are the people who work for the government and carry out its policies and programs. They have to follow the law, but they also have to interpret and apply them to different cases and contexts. This means that they have some discretion or freedom to decide how to do their jobs. Discretion is inevitable and necessary for public administration, but it also creates some risks. For example, administrators might abuse their discretion and act in unethical or illegal ways, or they might use their discretion inconsistently and create confusion or inequality. These problems show that the rule of law is not enough to ensure effective and democratic public administration. So what's the alternative? One possible solution was offered by Goss, a public administration scholar. He argued that if external forces such as the law or the politics cannot adequately shape the exercise of administrators' discretion, then democracy must rely on the administrator's professional norms. Professional norms are the standards and values that guide the behavior and performance of a profession. For example, doctors have professional norms that require them to respect their patients, protect their privacy, and provide quality care. Similarly, administrators have professional norms that require them to serve the public interest, uphold the public trust, and improve the public welfare. According to Goss, professional norms can help administrators use their discretion in a responsible and appropriate way. Professional norms can also help administrators cope with the complexity and uncertainty of their work. Professional norms can provide administrators with a sense of identity and purpose, as well as a source of motivation and satisfaction. Professional norms can also foster a culture of learning and improvement, as well as a community of support and collaboration. Professional norms can make administrators more accountable to themselves, their peers, and their profession. One of the main characteristics of the policy problems that the government and its workers face is that they are complex and diverse. This means that the policy problems involve multiple actors, factors, and perspectives, and that they change and vary over time and space. The complexity and the diversity of the policy problems pose a challenge for the government and its workers, especially for their accountability and their effectiveness. Accountability means that the government and its workers should explain and justify their actions and decisions and be held responsible for them. Effectiveness means that the government and its workers should do their job well and efficiently and achieve their goals and results. One of the main sources of the complexity and the diversity of the policy problems is the involvement of partnerships with the multiple levels of government and with the private sector. This means that the government and its workers have to work with other organizations, such as state and local governments or private businesses who may have different goals, values, and cultures, and who may share or compete for the resources, the authority, and the responsibility of the government and its workers. The involvement of partnerships with the multiple levels of government and with the private sector has increased and expanded in the 20th century as the governmental programs became more complex and diverse to address the new and emerging problems and issues such as the industrialization, the globalization, the urbanization, the immigration, the environment, or healthcare. The involvement of partnerships with the multiple levels of government and with the private sector has also strained and challenged the rule of law, which is the principle that the government and its workers should follow the law and the rules, and that the law and the rules should protect the rights and liberties of the people. The rule of law is the basis and the standard for administrative accountability that the government and its workers have to follow and meet. However, the rule of law may not be able to cover all or constrain all the aspects and dimensions of the government and its workers' actions and decisions, especially when they involve partnerships with other levels of government or with the private sector. The rule of law may also not be able to reflect or respond to all the preferences and interests of the people, the parties, or the groups, especially when they are diverse or conflicting. One of the examples of how the government and its workers tried to address the challenge of handling complex programs was the New Deal programs, launched by President Franklin D. Roosevelt in the 1930s. The New Deal programs were aimed at addressing the economic and social problems caused by the Great Depression, such as unemployment, poverty, or inequality. The New Deal programs involved a stronger and more active role of the federal government and a more reliance on the professional norms and expertise of the public administrators. The New Deal programs had some effects and impacts on public administration, such as they forced more reliance onto the professional norms of administrators, which are the standards and the guidelines that the public administrators should follow and meet based on their skills, their knowledge, and their ethics. The professional norms of administrators are the source and the measure of administrative effectiveness that the government and its workers have to follow and meet. They also brought more players from a variety of organizations into the pursuit of public policy, which are the goals and the actions that the government and its workers have to achieve and perform on behalf of the public. The players from a wider variety of organizations are the partners and the stakeholders of the government and its workers, who may have different roles and interests and who may cooperate or compete with the government and its workers. The New Deal programs also had some challenges and difficulties for public administration, such as they made it far more difficult to rely on any single rule of law standard to guide administrative action, which is the way and the method that the government and its workers should act and decide according to the law and the rules. The rule of law standard to guide administrative action is the mechanism and the procedure of administrative accountability that the government and its workers have to follow and to meet. Another way to ensure accountability is to look at the different elements or aspects of the government and its workers. This means that the government and its workers are not only accountable for their actions and decisions, but also for the money, their tasks, and their results. These elements or aspects are fiscal accountability, process accountability, program accountability. Fiscal accountability means that the government and its workers should spend money only on the programs that they are supposed to manage, and that they should spend it wisely and efficiently. This means that the money should be spent according to the law and the budget, and that it should not be wasted or misused. Process accountability means that the government and its workers should perform their tasks according to the standards and procedures that are set for them, and that they should do them well and effectively. This means that the tasks should be done according to the rules, quality, and that they should not be delayed or ignored. Program accountability means that the government and its workers should achieve the purpose and the goals of the program that they are responsible for, and that they should do this in the best way possible. This means that programs should achieve outcomes and impacts that are expected from them, and that they should not cause any problems or harms. To measure and evaluate these elements of accountability, the government and its workers can use different tools and methods, such as analysis of the Government Accountability Office, the GAO. This is an agency that works for Congress and that investigates and audits how the federal government and its workers spend money, perform tasks, and achieve results. The GAO can provide reports and recommendations to the Congress and the public and can help to improve the accountability of the government and its workers. Performance measurement systems are systems that the government at all levels can use to collect and analyze data and information about how the government and its workers spend money, perform tasks, and achieve results. These systems can provide indicators and benchmarks to the government and its workers, and it can help monitor and improve the accountability of government and its workers. One of the main challenges that the government and its workers face is that they may have to deal with multiple controllers who may not always agree on the priorities or the values of the government and its workers. For example, the government and its workers may have to follow the orders of the president, the Congress, the courts, the media, or the public, who may have different views or interests on what the government and its workers should do or not do. Another challenge that the government and its workers face is that they may have to deal with uncertainties which may make it hard to know what accountability means or how to achieve it. For example, the government and its workers may have to deal with complex and changing policies, which may require coordination and cooperation among different levels of government or different sectors. The government and its workers may also have to deal with ambiguous and vague laws, which may leave room for interpretation and discretion. One of the main dilemmas that the government and its workers face is that they may have to choose between voice or exit when they receive conflicting directions or confusing signals from their controllers. Voice means staying in their position and fighting for what they think is right, even if that risks dismissal or punishment. Exit means resigning from their positions, possibly with a public attack on the controller whose mandate they condemn. Both choices have advantages and disadvantages and can have different consequences for the government and its workers and their policies. One of the main solutions that the government and its workers can use to overcome these challenges and dilemmas is to find a balance between external and internal forces that can influence and shape their accountability. External forces are the efforts by the outside controllers, such as the law, the politics, or the public, that can check and control the government and its workers' actions and decisions. Internal forces are the factors within government and its workers, such as their character, their background, and their training, that can guide and motivate their actions and decisions. This balance depends ultimately on the ethical behavior of the government and its workers, who should act in accordance with the public interests and values. The government and its workers have a high standard of ethics that they have to follow and meet. This means that the public and the elected officials expect and demand that the government and its workers do their job in a way that is honest and fair, and that they do not do anything that is illegal or wrong. The high standard of ethics often comes as a shock for some people who come to the government from the private sector, where they may have engaged in activities that break the law or the rules. For example, they may have lobbied, contracted, or invested in ways that could create conflicts of interest or corruption in the government. The high standard of ethics is important and necessary for the government and its workers because they have more power and influence over over people's lives and rights, and they should use it wisely and carefully. The high standard of ethics is also important and necessary for the public because they trust and rely on the government and its workers to serve their interests and their good. In this lecture, we have discussed the concept of accountability, its origins, importance, elements, and approaches. We have seen that accountability is a complex and dynamic concept that has different meanings and dimensions depending on the context and perspective. We have also seen that accountability is a crucial and challenging aspect of public administration that requires balancing and integrating different forms of control, trust, cooperation, transparency, and participation. Accountability is not only a technical or procedural issue, but also a political and ethical one. It involves not only the actions and decisions of the administrators, but also the policies and values of the policymakers and the preferences and interests of the public. Accountability is not only a matter of accountability, but also a matter of responsibility, representation, and public service. As future public administrators, you will face many situations and dilemmas that will test your accountability. You will have to answer to different accountees for different accounts through different accounting processes. You will have to deal with the consequences of your accounts as they affect your behavior and performance. You will have to find the best way to ensure accountability without compromising efficiency, effectiveness, or innovation. I hope this lecture has given you some insights and tools to understand and practice accountability in public administration. I encourage you to read the assigned readings and to participate in the online discussion where you can share your questions, comments, and opinions on this topic. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to seeing you in our next lecture.